speakers and
Morning. Forget experts and colleagues to confront the truth we can no longer avoid, which is climate change is no longer environmental footprint. It is defining the economic and fiscal realities of our time. How do we
rewire Pakistan's economic and fiscal policy for climate prosperity, not as a side project, not as a checklist
given to us by donors, but as a core engine of growth, stability, and competitiveness?
That is the question. And across the globe,
markets are rewriting the rules. Investors reward resilience. Customers, consumers demand transparency.
Trade regimes like the EU Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism are no longer just warnings. They are live tariffs, which are affecting our exports today and will tomorrow. For decades, climate policy and economic policy have run in parallel tracks. One spoke of sustainability, the other was targeting GDP growth, fiscal discipline, and export targets. That era is over. The challenge and the opportunity before us is to fuse these tracks into a single high-speed rail that powers climate-smart growth. This is not an ideology anymore. It is the requirement of economic survival. Imagine a Pakistan where our rivers don't flood our villages, where our fields don't crack the endless drought, where our fields don't crack under endless drought, and where our
Is the mic working? Can you hear me out? No. So where climate is not a curse, but an opportunity for prosperity, this is the blueprint we are trying to build today. I'd like to begin with the certain facts.
Pakistan's carbon footprint is less than 1%. Our contributions to the global greenhouse emissions are less than 1%. Yet in 2025, we rank number 1 in the global climate risk index, the most climate vulnerable nation on earth. And this is not our doing, but we are facing the brunt of climate change. I'd like to remind you that in 2022, we witnessed the worst floods in our history. 1/3 of the country was underwater. Almost 30 million people were displaced. We lost 1,700 lives.
And we got a hit of $30 billion to our GDP in a matter of weeks. This year again, we were hit with floods. So every flood, every drought, every heat wave is a direct fiscal shock. Billions are lost in reconstruction cost. Billions are lost in agriculture output losses. Billions are lost in trade disruptions. This is not a climate crisis anymore, ladies and gentlemen. It is a national economic emergency. I'd like to remind here that there has been an injustice at the heart of it. The G20 nations responsible for 70% of the global carbon footprint built their prosperity on coal, oil, and gas. They owe us not pity, but partnership. Under the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement, they had committed to contribute $100 billion annually in the additional grant-based climate finance. In 2025, that promise still remains unfulfilled. Post 2022 floods, we had a pledge of $11 billion, only a fraction of which has been realized. Pakistan needs almost $38 to $50 billion just to adapt to build flood walls, drought-resistant crops, early warning systems. And this is not aid. This is legal reparations under the common but differentiated responsibilities. To the developed world, our message is pay your climate debt, fund our solar grids, transfer technology tariff-free, or watch migration instability and supply chain chaos crash your shores, because no one can avoid the impact of climate change. But we are not waiting for justice. We are building our own model of climate prosperity. Our federal budget of 2025-26 is our country's first fully climate-tagged budget. Every single rupee is coded green, gray, and pink in the SAP ERP system, where 9.4% of our total revenues, rupees 688 billion, is now climate relevant, tracked live on fabs.gov.pk. This is not symbolic. This is rewriting at a scale. I'd like to walk you through some of the transformative measures which are already in motion. Rupees 603 billion has been allocated for mitigation, a 183% surge from last year. The focus is on solar and wind, greening our grid through NTDC upgradations. You have started seeing EV buses coming in to different cities across Punjab This will be a big step towards mitigation. Rupees 85 billion for adaptation, flood walls in Sindh, drought-resistant wheat in Punjab, glacier monitors in Hunza. Carbon levy has been launched at rupees 2.5 rupees for petrol and diesel, which will be increased to 5 rupees. Revenue has been ring-fenced for solar mini grids and clean cooking. 30% of every PSDP project is now climate screened. No dams, no roads, no school will get funded unless it survives a 50-year flood scenario. Rupees 1 billion seed for the climate fund, Pakistan Climate Fund, which will 40% for adaptation, 30% green tech, open to ADB, World Bank, and private capital. NDC 3.0 has been submitted in September. 50% emissions will be cut by 2035, 60% renewable power, 30% EVs, and 50% land protected. Pakistan overall has been a part of a solar revolution during the last 1.5, 2 years. We have seen an import of almost 15,000 megawatts of solar panels. This is being led by the private sector, a big achievement for the private sector. 300-day monsoon shield, AI flood maps, 100 new weather radars, community grain banks in every flood-prone district. National carbon market has been set alive since December 2024. We are expecting the first auction in February 26. A textile mill, for example, switching to 1 megawatt from diesel to solar earns 8,200 credits. This rewiring is not just fiscal, it is trade critical. Under the Ministry of Commerce, we have the National Compliance Center, which is working at enterprise level to ensure voluntary compliances for exporters for the EU market regarding labor and environmental standards. CBAM preparedness cells have been made. They are training textile units to measure scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. So for example, a factory in Sialkot that switches to solar will have 0 CBAM fees in Brussels, $10 to $15 per ton in carbon credits, and 3% boost in turnover. This is how we turn climate risk into competitive advantage. We are moving fast, but policy alignment is not enough. We must now link our nationally determined contributions, NDCs, to PSDP. Every project proposal must include climate risk scoring. This opportunity is immense, $2 to $5 billion US in carbon market revenues by 2030, 1 million green jobs in renewable EVs and agroforestry, $10 billion in green exports by 2030, only if we act now. Pakistan is not a victim, we can be a pioneer. Work is underway on the Pakistan Climate Prosperity Plan. This is not another strategy document. This is a national economic transformational blueprint. Climate prosperity is the new growth model, where our task is not to respond to climate change. Our task is to design an economy that thrives because how we manage it. So ladies and gentlemen, even though Pakistan is facing the brunt of the climate impact, which has not been created by Pakistan, where our footprint is less than 1%, as I've already mentioned, but we need to prepare for what is coming ahead. And I feel that the government is there to listen to policymakers, climate experts, and these forums, these platforms where such discussions take place, the inputs will play a massive role in further aligning policy towards the correct direction. Thank you so much. It's an honor and pleasure to speak to you all. Very kind. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Honorable Rana. So I think with this, we'll be moving towards, I mean, we have one of the very key stakeholders in the whole of the climate debate where we're talking about, given Pakistan's climate vulnerabilities. I think it's an extremely important work in Pakistan is being done by Climate Vulnerability Forum. And for this, let me invite, we are very pleased to have with us Mr. Hamza Haroon. He's a regional director, South Asia of the CVF. So Hamza Saab, if you could please join us on the stage, and let me request the MIS team to kindly share the presentation in the slide deck, which includes the CVF introduction and his presentation of Hamza Saab. Thank you, Hamza Saab, please.
The presentation is on, Ubaid? Is it on? Oh, it's coming. Okay, cool. Thank you. Is there a clicker? Yeah, yeah, thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, a big thank you to STPI for organizing such an important event. Honorable Coordinator, I really admired the passion and the clarity you brought in your speech. So thank you so much for setting that up. I also want to quickly thank Abid Suleri Saab. As many of you know, we'll be signing a MOU right after this, the CVFV20 and STPI. I want to also thank Dr. Khalid Walid, Ubaid, Amin Saab. Very, very kind of you to invite us today for this very important conversation. What I want to do today is really tell you what's going on at the global level. You know, sometimes I find, and I'll be very honest with you all today, sometimes I find the conversations on climate happening in Pakistan to be confined to the borders within Pakistan. And that is a slight problem because we forget that the international conversations are happening on an entirely different tangent. So, you know, this slide is very critical because we put this slide when we are at the World Bank meetings, when we're at the COP meetings, when we're at FFD4, and we tell them that the fate of the most vulnerable is going to be the fate of this world. You can go to the next slide. Great. The next slide, please. So just to quickly give you an introduction of CVFV20, we are a group of 74 global South countries spread across the globe. And these countries are the most climate vulnerable countries of the world. Our presidency right now is with the Prime Minister of Barbados, Prime Minister Mia Mottley, and our Secretary General
is the former president of Maldives, President Nasheed. Previously,
the presidency was held by Ghana, and before that, it was held by Bangladesh. The next slide, please. This is what I was talking about. You know, when you start making an agenda out of this conversation at global forums like the World Bank, like FFD4, like COP30, and telling them that, look, you cannot move or progress on international financial architecture without keeping in mind what is happening in the vulnerable countries. Next slide, please. CVF has 4 critical pillars that I want to quickly talk about. One is the CVF Leaders Forum, which we have events at the UNGA, and we have critical discussions where the leaders of these governments meet. Then we have the V20 Finance Ministers Forum, which meet biannually. Then the Central Bank Governors Forum. This is a very critical forum because this is where we discuss balance of payment liquidity issues. Because what happens is when you are hit with a disaster, the first thing that happens is you're not liquid anymore because you're spending on rehabilitation, you're spending on disaster relief, and aid is going to take 36 to 48 months. The coordinator very rightly pointed out that, you know, there have been pledges made, but very little comes through. And that's a big problem when you're facing disasters yearly. You cannot continue to wait 36, 48 months. This formula is rigged. This system is rigged. It's not in favor for the vulnerable countries. And the last one is the Global Parliamentary Group. We have started picking up members of parliaments across 74 countries to come together and see what policies are needed to make sure that we can have a prosperous future ahead. Next slide, please. If this could work, this would make my life very easy. But I guess we're not going that way. Oh, great. So the work that we do, ladies and gentlemen, is not just based out of, you know, us putting a finger in the air and seeing where the wind is blowing. It's actually research based. We have evidence, we have numbers, we have data that points us in the direction that is leading towards the prosperity of these nations. And I'll talk to you about that as well today. So you guys are very clear when you go and sit in other forums of what exactly is going on when it comes to V20 countries. Next slide, please. But before we go there, there's one thing that keeps on coming. We are vulnerable nations. Everyone says that. Bangladesh says that. Nepal says that. Bhutan says that. But what is vulnerability? That's the most important thing to understand. My father was in the Navy. He used to tell me stories about the seas. He would tell me that, when the sea state is 3, the boats start to move a little bit. When the sea state is 5, you start to tremble, you start to fall over. And I think of our climate vulnerable nations in a similar pattern now. Because what we face is a storm. The storm remains the same. It's the same storm for everyone. What is different is the kind of boat you're in. The smaller the boat, the less agile the boat, the more you tremble, the more you tip over, the more you go to uncharted course where you don't want to go. The bigger the boat, the more agile the boat, it sustains its course. Vulnerability, in the end, is a capacity issue. If you go to the next slide, please. It is not about how much money you have. It is not about where you are based in the world. It is not about anything else other than capacity. And these are some of the issues that our countries face. We don't have what it takes to sustain ourselves when it comes to a disaster. We don't have the scientific understanding of how to get through these disasters. We don't have the adequate amount of money. This causes us to be in a smaller boat, to be in a less agile boat, to have less capacity than others, and not be able to follow the chart that was set out for us and not have the necessary resilience. This is a very important concept to understand. Once the capacity changes, we will start to stay on course. We will have what we call climate resilience. Next slide, please. Another thing that's happening on the global front that I want to share with you is that the capital flow is in the wrong direction. If you look at the chart that is on the screen, over $200 billion flows out of developing countries to developed countries. And what has come in is approximately 40 billion, out of which only 2 billion is concessional. Concessional is basically when your interest rates are lower than your medium-term GDP growth. That's what we consider a concessional. So a ratio of 1 to 100 when it comes to money in and money flowing out. That's what we face. Not only are we in a smaller boat, we have money leaving our countries into developed countries. Next slide, please. And if we decide that, okay, we have money flowing out, let's get good loans, let's figure a way out towards development. And I'm sure, sir, you're seeing this as well. The high cost of capital kills us. This is an average. Look at the global average, that line, and look at our cost of capital, which is higher. Our country's cost of capital is higher. Let me put it this way. If you want to put up a solar power plant in Maldives, it's going to cost you more if you put up a solar power plant in Spain. It's as simple as that, because the cost of capital is too high for our countries. Next slide, please. So not only the boat is small, the money is going in the wrong direction, and there's high cost of capital. And this slide is my favorite because it busts the myth of aid. The aid, ladies and gentlemen, is going to shrink. If you look at these numbers, these are ODA numbers, official ODA numbers, and it is predicting the number of dollars that are going to shrink because all these countries have changed their strategies. They're no longer going to commit to ODA. ODA is the kind of development assistance our countries require. So once again, repeating it, the boat is small, the cost of capital is high, the money is flowing out, and oh, by the way, the aid is also being cut. Next slide, please. Okay, Hamza, don't be so, glum about it. We can figure this out when we go and speak to them at the World Bank meetings, at the IMF meetings. But let me tell you one more thing. Our combined representation is minimal. Our voice, our voting power at these forums is minimal. This is something we talk about every time, which is our priority when we go to these forums, is that look at our numbers compared to the numbers of the G20. Coordinator Saab just rightly pointed out 70% of the global greenhouse gases are coming from the G20 countries. Look at their representation and look at our V20 representation of 70 countries. And you can see other organizations as well. So next slide, please. So what do we do? So one of the areas that we have been working on with our V20 countries is the climate prosperity plan. I know Anam is here as well. She's going to go a bit more deeper in the panel discussion, but I'll give you a very high level glimpse of what climate prosperity plans are doing. And we're making one in Pakistan as well, working with the finance ministry and the climate ministry and other line ministries as well. So next slide, please. So climate prosperity plans are essentially multi-phased, fully costed, low emission, climate resilient roadmaps. Because we cannot keep on screaming to the world that we are vulnerable nations. We need to tell the world that we are vulnerable nations. You're the one who's causing it. And oh, by the way, we have all these investment opportunities, which not only hit our climate goals, but also hit our development goals. That's the strategy we want to take. And there are countries that you see on the presentation that are already taking that step, which includes Pakistan, by the way. And there's some countries that we'll be working on next year to make sure that they have their climate prosperity plans. In the third COP30, in the 8th COP30 letter, the president of the COP presidency has also pointed out that for adaptation needs, the CPP and the country platform are integral. This is just a few weeks back when the letter came out. So we're very happy that this is getting global recognition of the impact that it's creating for these countries. Next slide, please. What we've also found in our research, and this is what I was talking about, evidence-based policy, is that what we're getting in our countries is 5 times lower than what we need to get. 5 times lower. The EMDC report that came out says that they need $2.4 trillion a year to have the right amount of development, climate resilience baked into their economies. Next slide, please. So what goes into a CPP? The CPP is a very different document because the first thing we do is we create a macroeconomic model all the way up to 2050 and tell you where will the load take us if we have these interventions. But it's not a static macroeconomic model. That's the mistake we made in the past. What we do in our macroeconomic model is we stress test everything. And we ensure that one variable has the right impact at all other variables that impact our economy. Because you can't just look at one thing in isolation. You have to see how it impacts, other variables in the economy. Then we outline what is required in terms of regulatory, environment, and industrial policy that needs to change. And the last thing is, this is where it's completely different from other reports, is we give a set of projects that are in line with what we're talking about. These are real projects, real numbers, real people who are saying that, look, if you invest in us, we will be able to create a dent when it comes to SDGs, when it comes to climate resilience, when it comes to other impacts. That's what we're doing in the report for Pakistan as well and other countries in South Asia. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is just a visual representation of the model and how it works. And this is what I was talking about. A whole of society, whole of government understanding of how one variable impacts the other, and then creating a scenario all the way up to 2050, but not just for GDP growth, but also understanding how many green jobs are we going to create, how many number of tons of emissions we're going to decrease. All of that comes out in the model. Next slide, please. Last piece that I want to talk to you about is we have a wonderful habit of creating report after report. and I'm sure many of you will agree with us. If you go to a government office, I find it very funny because if you look at the cabinet on the side, it has amazing amount of reports that are there. What we want to do differently is that rather than that report, the climate prosperity report sitting in that cabinet, which is going to be a live document, by the way, updated every 3 months, we want someone to own this climate prosperity plan. And what better than national ownership, a whole of society, whole of government ownership. So what we want is, and we've been speaking to the ministers of finance and the climate ministries to figure out a way to create what we call a country platform, not a loan-based country platform, a country platform which is based on a singular national strategy and with a singular vision of implementation. Because now you have the strategy. Now let's get to work. So if you see on the top right, these are all the actions that the country platform will take. And below you'll have the outcomes of that country platform, which includes, project preparation, transaction advisory. These are important things. And for that, sometimes we look up to our multilateral or, other partners, which I think should be now housed within. The next slide, please. But Hamza, you're talking about all these things and, these things can't happen. These are happening. These things are happening. So Ghana is a case in point where they've not only created the climate prosperity plan, they've created a country platform with a singular vision that the country platform is the delivery unit for that climate prosperity plan. This chart that you're seeing, it has the presidency of Ghana, it has the climate change ministry of Ghana, and they're doing all these things. They're hitting their sectors, they're hitting the right bilateral partners, they're hitting the right vertical funds and getting things done. And I believe this is the way forward for implementation of climate prosperity plan. So in the end, I just want to once again thank you all for your patient listening. I know this was a lot, but I hope it helped you in understanding the kind of things that are happening at the global front and the kind of initiatives that we need to look up to ensure that we reach there. I want to also take this time to thank once again the STPI team. And I also want to thank my team as well, which is sitting here. They've done some phenomenal work over the last 3-4 months. You will see the results of it in a few days because we've been working tirelessly on the climate prosperity plan. So I want to thank the team here as well. And thank you so much. And I'll be around. So if you have any questions, would be happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hamza Saab, for this again wonderful presentation. With this, we'll be moving towards a panel discussion that would be chaired by Rana Afzal Saab. So let me kind of invite the panelists to please join us on the stage, starting from Mr. Farhan Rana from International Renewable Energy Agency. Thank you, Farhan, from traveling all the way. Ms. Anam Rathore, she is the country team lead, Pakistan, for the Climate Vulnerability Forum. Dr. Fahmida Khatun, ma'am, if you can please join us on the stage. And sir, Dr. Fahmida is also, she's the Executive Director of Center for Policy Dialogue, Bangladesh, and she's coming all the way from there. Madam, if you could please join us. An Rehmat Saab from the team of IMS, one of the very close partners of the Danish work in Pakistan as well. And Hamza Saab, if you could please join us on the stage. And last, about the chief guest, Rana Saab, if you could please also join us on the stage. And the session will be moderated by Nisma. So let me invite Nisma on the podium to take the discussion forward from here.
So before we begin, I'd just like to give you an overview of the discussion. So our discussion today, I believe that the topic is in fact not just one conversation, but rather many interlinked ones, cutting across multiple domains, from energy transition and fiscal reforms to financial innovation, institutional coordination, and even public management. So to explore these different layers, we're joined by an excellent panel representing diverse expertise with voices from international organizations, research think tanks, and local civil society even, and communications organizations. So through the discussion, we'll try to touch on several different aspects, from mobilizing finance and aligning policies to creating, say, the institutional and societal conditions that can help countries like Pakistan and hopefully many others in the global south as well, to effectively integrate climate perspectives into their economic and development plans. So since the energy transition remains at the heart of both mitigation or climate prosperity and economic competitiveness, and we happen to have two distinguished speakers that have worked extensively on financing the energy transition to drive climate action, I would like to start there and with Farhan, closest first, I guess, since Irene is a key player on the topic. So for Pakistan, and in fact, emerging countries in general, so despite growing renewable investments, factors like affordability and access still pose major challenges, making it essential for them to design their investment frameworks that simultaneously advance decarbonization and shared prosperity. So drawing from your work and experience, how do you see emerging economies in particular do that, especially with the limited fiscal headroom?
I hope you can hear me okay.
Yeah.
No? Yeah, okay. Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation. It's great to be here with you. Great to be back in Islamabad. Yeah, for the question, so let me just share some headline figures with you to put the renewable energy progress, the energy transition progress into perspective. So last year was again a record-breaking year for renewables. In fact, renewable energy is breaking records every year for the last 5-6 years. Globally, we added about 587 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity. But as Hamza's presentation alluded, most of this progress, most of this investment is actually very concentrated. It's concentrated in China and in developed economies in European Union and North America. And for the developing economies, it's mainly concentrated in emerging markets that are within the G20 membership. So in order to make this progress more just and inclusive and to distribute some of these socioeconomic benefits that the energy transition has, what you really need is a comprehensive set of policies that are grounded in a framework grounded in international collaboration on trade and finance, and I'll unpack that a little bit. So again, it's not just about adding these megawatts on the ground, it's about how these megawatts translate into jobs, into economic growth, into energy security, and access to affordable finance. So to distribute these benefits equally and to make the energy transition more investable in countries like Pakistan, you need 5 or 6 set of policies. So first, you need the enablers, which are your clear long-term targets that set the overall direction for the country. So Pakistan has just communicated their NDC and the target of 60% renewables in the power mix. That's a great start there. What you also need then is deployment policies, such as feed-in tariffs and auctions that will move the market in that direction. And these need to be grounded in sound energy planning. On top of that, you need integrating policies that govern how renewables will connect to the grid and to the wider energy system. And that's particularly important for Pakistan now with this boom in decentralized solar. In addition, you need structural policies, which are very important for a just and inclusive energy transition. So these will cover your carbon taxation, redirection of fossil fuel subsidies, but also providing safety nets and training the workforce, providing the right skills. And you also need the right fiscal and monetary policies, which govern the broader macroeconomic environment. So these would be your rules around interest rates or taxation or depreciation, which will affect project economics. And all of this needs to come within a comprehensive framework that is then grounded in international collaboration, particularly on trade and finance. On the finance piece, as Hamza also mentioned,
What we need is more concessional financing, more concessional loans, more grants, and that is not really the case. The current environment that we see with ODA, with development assistance, is that concessional finance was already scarce and it's becoming more and more scarce. So we've seen how it's going down for majority of these development sectors. In 2023, we actually saw that overall ODA for clean energy actually went up, but the share of grants, the share of concessional finance, it's actually going down. And so even though the direction that most developed countries that can provide this financing and multilateral bodies that can provide this financing, even though the direction that they're taking is not in favor of expanding the scale of concessional finance, that's exactly the opposite of what countries like Pakistan need. And secondly, what we need is more international collaboration on trade. So the current trade environment is very restrictive. And if we talk about supply chains, if we talk about manufacturing of clean energy technologies, manufacturers in countries like India, Indonesia, Southeast Asia in general, they've been hit pretty badly by the recent tariffs. So we need more international collaboration on trade and finance in order to achieve a just and inclusive energy transition and also make it more investable. We'll stop there.
Thank you, Farhan. So just to go a little further on what you just said, so we need, at some point, we're going to need, so if we want to go for a more collaborative international approach, we would need de-risking instruments in particular, because we need investor confidence to be high, and that is not really a scenario for Pakistan right now. So in that sense, what instruments do you think are available out there, and which should we develop just to be there?
Yeah, so again, in the renewable energy space, the one instrument that's actually worked really, really well over the last few years is sovereign guarantees. And it's in the current macroeconomic environment, as it's been mentioned multiple times, countries just don't have the fiscal space to provide those. So we really need to look at instruments that don't impact sovereign debt, that allow countries to invest in renewables in the broader energy transition without shrinking their fiscal space. But there's not a lot of instruments like that out there. So multilateral development banks, DFIs, they've of course provided instruments like partial risk guarantees, currency swaps, liquidity facilities, curtailment reserves, and whatnot. We've seen a lot of this happening in Africa recently. And these instruments have been quite successful in bringing projects online, but they work on a project-specific basis. They'll help bring certain projects online, but they're not really addressing systemic risks that can allow a reinforcing pipeline of bankable projects to come together on their own. So what we need is more systemic de-risking, and that really entails, sound planning, competitive procurement, transparency, strengthening institutions. But this is something that takes years, maybe decades to develop. But I can share one example with you of a de-risking instrument that actually does not impact sovereign debt. And that's worked quite well in countries like Malawi and Burundi. So the Africa Trade Insurance Agency has this facility called the Regional Liquidity Facility Support, which basically provides liquidity guarantees to developers, to project developers, in case the utility, the off-taker, fails to make payments. So it covers payments up to 3 to 6 months. And unlike other instruments, they do not require a counter indemnity from the government. So they don't have any impact on the sovereign debt. So they've helped mobilize about $130 million in Burundi and Malawi. This was back in 2020. And so these are the kind of instruments that we should look at further.
Thank you. Thank you, Farhan, for giving a relatively clear view on the investment and financial realities and how they can sort of linger on when we balance climate or energy needs and fiscal limits. And as you highlighted, these investments do not exist in a vacuum. So they kind of depend on national and regional financial ecosystems as well, and enabling policy frameworks to a certain extent too. So now I would like to zoom out for a moment to that regional picture and invite Dr. Pierre Horna, if he's already with us. To elaborate a little on UNESCAP's work around this. So he's good? Okay. So to begin with, Dr. Horna, maybe in 2 to 3 minutes, could you please briefly share your observations on where clean energy and climate-related investments are currently concentrated across Asia Pacific, and maybe which sectors or sub-regions remain underserved? And also, how do you see these trends differing between developed and developing economies? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you very much for the invitation from SDPI. I'm very happy to be here, and also happy to be seeing my colleague from IRENA, Mr. Farhan Aran. We've been working together last year and this year, actually, in the publishing of a report between ESCAP and IRENA on financing the energy transition. So in my experience with the clean energy finance, as it has been said, current investment flows in the Asia Pacific are highly concentrated in utility scale solar and wind projects, especially in countries, bigger countries like China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. These markets, of course, have benefited from feed-in tariff programs, competitive actions, and strong government mandates that have attracted both domestic and foreign investors. We've seen also, to some extent, that Vietnam and Indonesia, with the launching of the Just Energy Transition Partnership of JETPs, have also boosted some of these specific investments for gearing in that direction. We have seen that at the same time, distributed renewable energy efficiency, and grid modernization remained profoundly underserved. ESCAP estimates that Southeast Asia needs about $190 billion USD a year in clean energy investments to align with the climate goals, but currently levels reach only 32 billion out of these 190 billion that we have projected. Grid upgrades in particular are as a bottleneck, where transmission losses reach 15 to 20% in some systems compared to the single-digit losses in advanced economies. So now, if we compare developed and emerging economies, the divergence is striking. In developed Asian Pacific markets, like Japan, Korea, and others, capital markets are deeper and the weighted average cost of capitals for renewables is typically between 4 and 6%, enabling investment for innovation, storage, and advanced grid technologies. In contrast, we've seen in our report, as I said, written by ESCAP and IRENA, that emerging and least developed economies, the cost of capital can exceed 10 to 13%, eroding to the cost advantages of renewables. Investors then perceive higher risk due to regulatory uncertainty, currency mismatch, and fragmented governance. I will come back to this in the next questions. But I think you've seen that this makes finance remains very expensive and scarce. Now, the question exacerbates when it comes to fossil fuel subsidies, which, as you all know, continue to distort market signals. In East Asia and the Pacific, for instance, these subsidies amount to around 4% of the regional GDP, artificially lowering the apparent cost of coal. As a result, we've seen that coal still provides 45% of the region's electricity, and the Asia Pacific hosts nearly 80% of the world's operating coal plants, or CFPPs. Until these subsidies, and we have seen that in our report, are reformed or gradually removed, renewables will still struggle, unfortunately, to compete on a level playing field. So all in all, I would like to just summarize by saying that we can definitely involve a more enabling financial landscape, as has been said earlier, by 3 major points. 1, broaden the scope of investment beyond large scale and wind to include distributed renewables, storage, and energy efficiency, sectors that to our knowledge and opinion, are critical for resilience and inclusion. Number two, reduce financing costs through concessional capital, credit guarantees, and strong local currency bond markets to crowd in private investments. And finally, reforming policies and subsidies, creating predictable, transparent, and frameworks that renew clean energy and penalize carbon intensity. We've seen that the last point is very critical, particularly for the coordination frameworks and the governance that is needed in order to strengthen the trust that investors should provide to these particular jurisdictions. Bridging this divide requires not just capital, but confidence built on coherent policies, regional cooperation, as well as sustainable finance instruments that make the energy transition affordable and inclusive for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Orna. Just to, if you could just sort of elaborate a little on the 3 points you highlighted, maybe by giving 1 or 2 examples for each, so it's so we can develop a better understanding of the concepts. Thank you.
Sure. In terms of the broadening the scope of investment beyond large-scale solar and wind to include distributed renewables, we've seen that traditional project finance remains dominant in several innovative instruments that are, of course, gaining traction. We've seen particularly blended finance facilities, sustainable linked bonds, and de-risking mechanisms that were supposed to design to attract private capital into market that were, of course, seen a bit too risky, particularly in those economies. So if you look at the examples of the Asian Development Bank's energy transition mechanisms, that is, of course, working for 3 countries in Southeast Asia, these energy transition mechanisms, or ETM, has been creating a managed fund to buy out and retire coal plants early, using concessional and commercial finance blended together to make this transaction viable. Now, we've seen that in the case of the rise of sovereign and corporate green and sustainable linked bonds, the SLBs, to reduce the financing, as example for point number 2, we've seen that the SLBs, whether it's happening in the world where SLBs are going on decline, but if you look at the first SLB that has been issued in the energy sector in 2019, how this has been impacted in countries that are following some of these good examples and good case studies. For example, in the case of the Philippines and Indonesia, they have issued sustainable bonds to finance renewable energy and resilience infrastructure, including social inclusion projects. The Philippines Green Energy Auction Program and Indonesia's state-backed Green Sukuk illustrate how local capital markets are gradually integrating sustainability criteria. Of course, in the case of Indonesia, is supported by the transition taxonomy that was recently launched by the financial regulator OJK. So you've seen also that these instruments not only mobilize domestic investors, but also signal national commitment to climate goals critical for attracting international finance. Now, if you go to the example of the Just Energy Transition Partnership source of finance in South Africa, not in Asia and the Pacific, but in South Africa, the source of this finance is local. It's provided by local investors, and that also remains an interesting and attractive feature from what happens in other regions in the world, particularly in Africa. Now, all of that says, of course, that this is very important. The first one, pillar number 1, on broadening the scope of investments, as well as pillar number 2 of reducing financial costs. But the problem, as we've seen in many ways, and I would agree to the keynote speaker when he talks about the coordination platform of one sort of a country platform that would deal with these issues, is to precisely create a governance framework for the country to make sure that this type of renewable investments depend heavily on complementary governance reforms. That is critical for this point. We've seen that in countries like Indonesia, Vietnam, and within the JETPs, we've seen that there are some allegations of governance failures within those platforms because there was an issue between line ministries of energy and finance and that of environment, something that we are working very, very deeply in the ESCAP FET project that I am handling for these countries. And as a matter of fact, you look at what's happening also in other a specific partnership like the Financing Asians Transition Partnership, FASP, which was launched by the Singapore Authority of Monetary Authority of Singapore, MAS, which demonstrates the potential of combining concessional fines, guarantees, and policy reforms. That's all the three pillars that I'm saying in one, of combining those in order to unlock large private flows. But of course, we cautioned, and we have done it already in our report, that only a fraction of pledged funds could actually be disbursed if we continue with this fragmented governance and transparency, and of course, delivery frameworks. I stop here if you need more questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Arna, for sharing these insights and also providing relevant examples. I believe these are important to sort of help us understand how financial ecosystems can support national action and how financing innovation alone is not enough to bring about meaningful change. It should also rest on sound institutions and coherent policy systems. So building on that, I would now like to come to Anam and request her to briefly highlight some experiences from V20 countries, since they represent some of the most vulnerable populations across the globe. And Anam, while doing so, could you please highlight some institutional reforms that have proven most effective in mainstreaming climate risk into fiscal and budgetary processes within these countries as well?
Thank you so much. Firstly, I would just like to thank SDPI for bringing this important topic that, how we have to rewire our economic and fiscal planning when we talk about climate prosperity. Talking specifically about V20 countries. So the work that V20 is doing is the best thing about it. These are the reforms and the tools are specifically for these vulnerable countries. So these are financial mechanisms that just don't fill fiscal gaps, but they restructure the economic risks as well. So the V20 have pioneered institutional innovations that make climate risk visible in fiscal planning. And one of the example is climate budget tagging. It's now being used in Bangladesh, in Ghana, in the Philippines, and it's being used to identify and track climate relevant expenditures within the national budget. And it's something that we also started in Pakistan this year. Another thing is the integrated assessment models, which links climate shocks to macroeconomic impacts. And it's also helping in these countries, helping the ministries of finance quantify climate related fiscal risks. Another thing is the whole of economy frameworks that where fiscal, financial, environmental data are being aligned to ensure that these Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Planning, Ministry of Climate, they share a common analytical base. And in Pakistan, when the CPP, which hopefully, inshallah, will be launched in a few weeks' time. So the CPP in Pakistan is also adopting the same approach. We're combining data-driven fiscal planning with institutional reforms that again align the public investment management, debt sustainability frameworks, and climate priorities into one coherent system. And other thing, again, I'm going to talk about the V20 countries where the CPP is already there, which includes Ghana, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, and Barbados. So these are what they're doing is they're also institutionalizing climate risk by embedding them into macroeconomic forecasting, in debt analysis, in investment appraisal systems. So the CPPs, they have these macroeconomic model which integrates climate and social and economic indicators to assess trade-offs and co-benefits. So what's that doing is it is allowing the policymakers to quantify both the cost of inaction and the economic gains of those resilience. So it shifts the climate consideration from cost to investment. So in short, by making, as I said, by making climate risk a fiscal variable, the CPP countries are turning uncertainty into measurable, manageable data, and then opportunities into policy.
Thank you for highlighting the V20 experiences. So when we look at Pakistan in particular, how do you see us actually being able to institutionalize these tools or the initiatives that other countries are using and may be relevant to us within our, economic planning processes? And while doing so, what coordination mechanisms would be essential to ensure coherence between the various actors, mainly the ministries and provincial and federal ministries here?
I think Hamza also covered some of these parts, but I'm just going to briefly also explain what the CPP is. So when the CPP, the Climate Prosperity Plan, it's not just another climate roadmap. So we have enough of those. It's an investment and transformative strategy that embeds climate action directly into the national economic planning. So it integrates fiscal, economic, and environmental goals, all of them under one framework. So we're talking about ensuring that climate resilience is treated as an economic priority and not an environmental afterthought. So when we talk about the CPP, we talk about, from theory to implementation. We're setting targets and we're doing scenario modeling for that. Then we're making the environment, the conditions, the industries more conducive. And then at the end, we have those targets. So how do we achieve them? We actually have projects, and the work is to bring finance for those projects. And the point you raised about, the institutional architecture. So that's really important that there, again, this is something we talk about in the CPP, is that to operationalize such a system, what we need is a whole of government approach. And how we're envisioning it is at being anchored at the Ministry of Finance, but also being co-led by Ministry of Climate and Ministry of Planning. Because in the CPP, what we're recommending is, again, we're calling it a country platform. And you also saw the slide when Hamza showed that we want to ensure that there is coherence between fiscal, planning, and sectoral policies. Just to briefly how, again, what we want the mechanism to be like, we want to have like a steering committee, again, with the main ministries, finance, planning, and climate, and also the provincial governments being there. There should be a technical working group, and there should be a national monitoring system as well, so where we can track progress on resilience and the prosperity indicators we're talking about. So what does it do is, if we have an architecture like that, it prevents duplication. It ensures that there's an alignment with national policies, with alignment with the NDCs, and it also creates a single unified platform for climate investment, because what's happening right now is we are working in silos a lot. So a unified country platform with the whole of government approach is a very unified climate investment platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Anam. Just to quickly move on, I'd now like to shift the focus a little bit towards Bangladesh. And as we know that Bangladesh is also highly exposed to climate risks and has gone through say a tumultuous economic situation similarly to Pakistan, I believe we can learn a few lessons from how they're coping with the situation as well. So Dr. Fahmida, we have seen in recent years how Bangladesh has made notable progress in embedding climate considerations into its broader development and macroeconomic planning frameworks. So could you please briefly provide your perspective on how well this is working and what have been the key enablers that are allowing, say, climate and economic priorities to converge in practice as well?
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this session. So, as we heard from the presentation initially from Mr. Hamza about the climate vulnerable countries. So Bangladesh is one of the most climate vulnerable countries in the world. However, in the recent times, there has been a number of policies and measures from the policymakers. Bangladesh actually started to have its climate and environmental policies back in the early 90s, but then over the years it has developed and it has coped with different circumstances. So now we have a number of exclusively climate and environmental related policies, but it has also been integrated with the macro fiscal policy framework, because it is part of the attempt to integrate the climate issue with the mainstream, not just climate, in silos or separately standalone issue. So we have what is called this climate fiscal framework, CFF. Since 2014, this CFF has been adopted, and as part of that, fiscal decisions are now taken by considering climate issues, climate problems. And then as part of that climate fiscal framework, climate budget is also in place. Currently, 25 ministries prepare climate budget. And the 6 pillars of this climate budget include issues such as food security, infrastructure, agriculture, capacity building, energy, and all these. So which requires every ministry out of these 25 ministries, they have to report about their activities and what sort of allocations they have. Unfortunately, we do not have the follow-up, in the sense that when a budget is announced, we do not have the full picture of the expenditure part of it. We only know that utilization, because unfortunately the budget allocation is very low. It's less than 1%, whereas we need at least 4 to 5%. IMF has estimated that also. But even within this short or limited amount, the utilization is less. So this is a capacity issue. Then in terms of other policies, adaptation policies, we have national adaptation policy for the period 2025 to 2050. Yes, so that also has estimation of the requirement, and as part of that estimation, we need about $8.5 billion per year. And then we also have this NDCs. This is like many other countries during the run up to the COP30, we have updated our nationally determined commitments 3.0, which has raised the targets for both conditional and unconditional emission levels. And in the NDC 2.0, we have seen, like many other countries, we could fulfill the unconditional part, that is what we need to do. But the conditional one, which actually depends on the availability of foreign finance, external finance and support, that was not fulfilled. So, so this is a trend for many other countries. And then there are this climate prosperity plan is of course there, which integrates various policies within this. And we have this 5-year plan framework. Within that national 5-year plan framework, 7th 5-year plan, 8th 5-year plan, they all have climate as a separate pillar of the planning process. Then coming to the fiscal part also, there are many other sectoral policies, but touching upon the finance part, the central bank, for example, has also adopted various policies towards encouraging renewable energy. For example, refinancing scheme for green technology, environmental and social risk assessment guidelines, and also sustainable finance policy. So these are all helping for adoption of renewable energy and also adopting renewable energy related technologies. So these are some of the policy issues which are in place. Of course, like many other developing countries, the implementation is lacking. We'll have to improve and strengthen our capacity on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fahmida, for highlighting these. I believe they provide a useful perspective for Pakistan as it moves forward with shaping its fiscal reforms and climate agenda. Just to, as we reach towards the end, I would just like to move towards Mr. Adnan Rahmat, because in the context that beyond policies and institutions, there's also a question of how ideas that all of our panelists have highlighted might actually reach the public and gain legitimacy, because that is just as important as bringing in a policy, because if the public doesn't accept it, it's really hard to implement and bring about meaningful change. So if Mr. Adnan, you could enlighten us on how public understanding and media framing is, particularly are essential to build, say, practical political momentum and citizen support for complex fiscal and climate reforms. Yeah.
So thank you very much. So policies, do not speak themselves. And for them to relate to people or communities that they govern, they needs to, that connect needs to be mediated. And that's primarily media's job. But the greater challenge of how much of that is happening and whether it's adequate or what are the shortcomings also depends on two things. One, how professional our media is, and second, what are the opportunities available for a more ready access to information available that would help them, generate the type of content that would demystify these policies for people, for them to understand and provide their inputs. And so generally speaking, people's perceptions on issues such as climate are generally formulated by media's own understanding of those issues, and which is not a good place in our overall scheme of political evolution and how media freedoms have been impacted by political compulsions. And so we find that, while we keep talking, I've just heard of, whole of government approaches and whole of global, world approaches also, but very little or no focus on a whole of society approaches. And media's changing landscape affects how those policies will be understood by the public in general. And secondly, media's own shortcomings include, when we talk about climate, that it is generally framed as natural disaster when it comes to climate, and its cost to the government, not costs to the public, and the benefits that it could accrue from a policy like this. And so it's not just about communicating policies that have already been formulated, but also in the run-up to the formulation of those policies. So a lot of that, time has lapsed without, us being able to understand how much the public understands this and what it can do about it. And thirdly, just like, freedom of expression is rooted in how strong a democracy is. When we talk about communicating climate policies, climate is strongly rooted in the sciences. And understanding science and communicating science remains a general social challenge. It remains a government challenge, it remains a social challenge. And it's all the more so for the media, which does not have the structure where, there is investment being done in how they understand climate and how they can talk not just about climate policies, but this whole green budgeting and how it relates to the cost for the society. In terms of, what we can do about this, the first one, of course, is to try and encourage the media to link climate action and reform to the lived realities for for society and how it translates into benefits for them. Because what you don't want is to just let them imagine this as yet another stream of taxation or other policy coercions that will impact their lives. And so this means, maybe connecting, conveying the sense that climate action and fiscal stability and people's benefits go together. You will never hear this message in general. Secondly, I think this is a large country, and media's general structure, 4/5 of it is situated east of Indus, does not lend itself to more inclusion of people's interests in how the policy that translates for them, and large demographics go without even basic communication between the state and policy implementers and the public. And thirdly, clearly climate is a national policy, and we are good at talking about how religion bonds everyone and maybe cricket, but not climate, even though now it's emerged as a fundamental to how the entire budget is being done, as the coordinator rightly pointed out. And so for that, maybe framing climate as an inclusive shared national objectives, and how that translates into local communities at the district level, where there could be local government officials, the focal persons on climate, the civil society and the local media can maybe meet once a month. Those structures will have to be supported, without which climate will just remain an imaginary for the state and the public in general. As you know, there's always this wide gulf in terms of trust between them.
Thank you, Mr. Adnan, for actually highlighting these challenges and also providing some actionable solutions. With this, I think we can conclude the discussion here. So thank you to all the panelists for their meaningful interventions and pertinent recommendations. At this point, I think I would like to invite Mr. Rana Ihsan Afzal to share some of his remarks on this. Thank you.
I would like to thank all panelists who contributed from their knowledge and experience on how we can tackle this current situation. So I would like to summarize. Can you hear me? So at the end of the day, you can adopt the policy, you can make a good policy, but it is the capacity building which is required and the implementation which brings the true change. So I agree. It is at the district level, it is at the local bodies level where true change has to come. For example, when we go to KPK and you see these waterfalls, and this water is actually going over the road and not via a tunnel going down the mountain. So that infrastructure investment which is taking place at the local bodies or the district level, that the capacity needs to be built over there. So unless we are investing, policy framework is there, we have enabled carbon trade. So that awareness has to go to the enterprise level. And this is always the challenge. So I believe, this remains the challenge for us, and we will be working towards that. And once again, I would like to thank all the panelists for their important input and their experience. Hopefully, we will learn from this and gain from this and improve implementation and capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. With this, I'll just invite Dr. Abid Suleiri for his vote of thanks. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nisma. One of the challenge and problem with our annual conference format is that there are parallel session, and I have to be in almost all the sessions. So I couldn't get benefit of the very rich discussion that had already taken place before I joined the panel. But I think taking a cue from Rana Ihsan Afzal Saab's point, for any policy to be successful, there are at least 4 prerequisites. The first one is institutional arrangement. The second one is financial allocations for that policy to implement it. Third one is human resources. And fourth one is the technical know-how and software and equipments. Now, when we are talking of rewiring our climate finance, so climate finance is something which has become a buzzword in 2024, 2025 after 2022 floods. But do we have institutional arrangement which ministry or department would be interested to take care of climate finance? It's everybody's job, and my only fear is that it may become no one's job. So Ministry of Climate Change is a contender, Economic Affairs Division is a contender, Ministry of Finance is a contender, Ministry of Planning is a contender, Foreign Office is a contender, all of them in their own right. It's a right place for them to take care of climate finance. But unless and unless till we don't have an institutional collaboration and coordination with them, this rewiring will not help, and we need to rewire it, and making the benefit of presence of Rana Hassan Saab, who is coordinator to Prime Minister. I would strongly recommend that we need to think of some sort of institutional arrangement. I happen to be the chair of NDRMF as well, also National Disaster Risk Management Fund, and I realized that the presence of 4 secretaries in the board that has actually helped us in taking decision. We have in the board were working with me, Secretary Finance, Secretary Planning, Secretary Climate Change, and Secretary EAD. So our board at NDRMF, I think because of the presence of 4 federal secretaries there, we can immediately take any policy level decision. The secretaries, they agree, they disagree, but there is at least no bureaucratic hurdle in many of the things taking them forward. So perhaps that sort of model should be replicated for climate financing, so that the ministries, relevant ministries and departments, they can somehow can work in close collaboration with each other. Second is, as I said, it's financial allocation. Climate finance is not that the world would be coming and giving us a blank check. We will have to have investment in human resources, in technical proposal development, in finding opportunity, getting ourselves accredited in at various forums, and all of this, it require some initial investment, and that investment has to be there. If we have to tag our own domestic investment as green investment or climate investment, again, we need to have some technical know-how and technical skill, which brings me to my last 2 prerequisites, human resources and the availability of software and hardware. So I think in this new world order, where we are talking of blending finance, we are talking of climate finance, we are talking of private sector's involvement, and finance minister would be speaking in a plenary tomorrow discussing blending finance and how Pakistan is ready or not ready for it. We need to take this topic serious and need to do our homework right, so that we can really capitalize upon it. I'm thankful to all the distinguished delegates and panelists who joined here and shared their words of wisdom. And I'm also thankful to all of you who are sitting here and who are taking notes and would be making interventions to make this conference successful. Thank you very much.
And yes, while we're preparing for the picture, let me also kind of mention that SDPI today is launching one of its reports on exploring country platforms to advance Pakistan's energy transition. It should be out by the day end, hopefully. And yes, but please go ahead. And then we have some giveaways. If I can request Rahat to please. And just to mention that SDPI and CVF will be shortly signing in MOU. It's on the room next to this one. So those of you interested, please do join us for the ceremony. And if I can kindly request the team SDPI to please take the guests here to the room just on right side of it. Thank you. So thank you so much, everyone. Feel free. Yeah, thank you so much for the discussion.